Hi y'all, it's me again. I'm going to continue reading from my book, The 1900s. The Princess. Edith Boylan Galt Wilson was a descendant of Pocahontas. It was an ancestry that Edith was proud of and wished to show off. During World War I, the Navy asked her to provide names for many of the ships being launched for a war effort, a responsibility she took very seriously. She became the first lady to christen a ship bound for active duty. The Quistconch. I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't know. It's very comment down below if you think I'm wrong. Virtually every name she chose from then on was Native American in origin. The Pocahontas connection became particularly handy in Europe. While visiting there with her husband for the Versailles treaty negotiations out there where Edith was snubbed by a prominent French duchess who didn't think that an American first lady was worthy of being welcomed as a fellow upperclassman. Upon hearing that Mrs. Wilson was a descendant of the great American princess Pocahontas, however, she did an about-face. Edith was cordially invited to the Duchess' home and received with all the etiquette appropriate to a royal visit. Wow. Beta Dregs. Edith's Native American ancestry was a well-known fact, but to one concerned citizen, it produced a rather thorny conundrum. They made it straight to receive a letter reminding them of the old law forbidding the possession of liquor by American Indians. The writer went on to insist that, as the First Lady had been imbibing alcohol in public at social events, a warrant for arrest to be issued and acted upon forthwith. For the record, the President did not act on the suggestion. Thank God. Because, I mean, that's a dumb law to have, you know? But anyways, let's continue. Over the top. As First Lady during the First World War, Edith Wilson insisted on doing her part. And then some. While most Americans worried about whether the Southern husband would come home in one piece, Mrs. Wilson took it upon herself to fret over the soldier's chastity. She penned an open letter to the women of Europe, pleading with them to prevent American doughboys from giving in to the temptations that came with the unnatural life of the camp. We can only assume the soldiers themselves wished that their First Lady hadn't been so concerned. Right? But anyway, let's continue. Adding insult to injury. Edith was a rather provincial woman with almost no formal education to speak of. And despite this, the only First Lady in history to achieve something like executive power, her regency during Woodrow's illness was unprecedented and it scared the bejeebers out of plenty of people. For good reason. Though she had a quick mind and a great deal of character, her notions of government had come solely as a result of being Wilson's wife and confidant. These aren't exactly presidential credentials, and Edith's decision-making processes at times could be pretty screwed up. Take the Cruford Stewart case, for instance. George Cruford Stewart was the attaché to British Ambassador Lord Grey and something of a wag. In the months following the formal announcement of President Wilson's engagement to Edith Galt, stories started circulating like wildfire about the couple's premarital sexual relations, a topic that had become popular ever since Woodrow and Edith were seen spending so much time together. What did Mrs. Galt do when the President asked her to marry him? When one joke fall out of bed. This particular crank was a favorite of Cruford Stewart's, who liked to tell it at dinner parties. That the witty Brit's impertinence made it back to the White House is hardly surprising, but it did much more than merely irritate the First Lady. It steered the course of government legislation. When Lord Grey offered his invaluable assistance in helping the Wilsons get the League Treaty passed by the Senate, Edith refused to let him see her husband. In fact, she, and hence the White House, refused to even acknowledge Grey, an ugly first in the course of British-American relations. And why? Because that irreverent little gutter snipe Crawford Stewart was Grey's attaché. Until Grey fired him, Edith insisted the President would remain off-limits to the President Ambassador. Grey, appalled at the pettiness of the situation, went so far as to demote Crawford Stewart, but it wasn't enough for the First Lady. They seemed not to realize how her shallow instincts were killing the best chance for her husband's League idea to get the get by the Senate. Exasperated and incredulous, Lord Grey finally gave up and went home. Sorry for yawning. I'm just so tired. I'm so exhausted. I just want to sleep all the time. Chapter 25. Florence Kling Harding. August 15th, 1860 to November 21st, 1924. Married March 1880 to Henry D. Wolfe. July 8th, 1891 to Warren Harding. Presidential husband, Warren G. Harding. Children, Eugene Marshall D. Wolfe. First lady, 1921 through 1923. Astrological sign, Leo. Religion, Methodist. Someone, well, Warren Harding, I have got you the presidency. What are you going to do with it? It is ironic that the first presidential election in which women could vote in the United States sent a shameless adulterer to the White House. But perhaps the greatest irony of all is that Warren Harding couldn't possibly have become president without his incomparable wife, whose ambitious, savvy, and outspokenness were proof positive that American women had truly come into their own. Florence Kling was born in Marion, Ohio, the eldest of three children to Amos and Louisa Kling. Amos, one of the town's richest businessmen, was an insufferable disciplinarian who wasn't above whipping his children with a switch when they chaffed against his authority, which is something that Florence did often. Much to her father's wrathful displeasure, she developed an independent streak early on in life, a personality trait that got only stronger after she went to study music at the Cincinnati Conservatory. Upon returning, she took to staying out late with the wrong crowd and get locked out of the house by angry Amos. It wasn't a touching father-daughter relationship, to be sure. But of all the things that got her father foaming at the mouth, nothing was worse than Florence's habit of choosing the wrong man. In 1880, she foolishly eloped with a local inebriate named Henry D. Wolfe, and 6 months later bore him a son. Needless to say, Amos was furious about his daughter's irresponsibility, especially when she came back home with little Eugene Marshall in her arms after being abandoned by her husband. Amos flatly refused to admit them, and Florence was forced to support herself and her child by giving piano lessons. By 1885, she filed for separation from the dreamboat D. Wolfe and her father. Convinced that Florence had learned a lesson, agreed to adopt her child as his own in exchange for washing hands of Florence's financial security. Enticed by the prospect of freedom, she took her father's offer and brought the whole nasty tragedy to an end in 1886 by finalizing a divorce. So she's the only one so far that got a divorce before she married her presidential husband. Hey, nothing wrong with that. I mean, like, do what you must do, you know? Anyways, let's continue. Florence Harding was the first lady to fly in an airplane. And she insisted on a female pilot. I wonder that female pilot was Amelia Earhart. Imagine. I mean, I wouldn't be too surprised about that. It wasn't long, however, before Florence was again exhibiting her questionable taste in men. Warren Harding, a publisher of the Marion Star, was easygoing and handsome. That was enough for Florence, who proceeded to chase after his affections with alarming determination. She was 5 years older than he, and hardly as attractive as the usual sort of women with whom Harding typically socialized. Florence kept at him, however, and Warren, perhaps tempted by her father's wealth, eventually gave in. As Harding's own father once admitted, it was a good thing that Warren was very good. He'd always be pregnant because he could never say no. Ouch. Ouch. The wedding in July 1891 was held sans the father of the bride, who predictably had formed a poor opinion of the weak-willed newspaperman his daughter insisted on marrying, and was not only boycotted the ceremony. He threatened those who went with a severing of loans from his bank. The nuptials went ahead despite Mr. Clinton's punitive measures, commencing what would become one of the strangest marriages in American political history. Warren soon began doubting his choice to marry. Indomitable, suspicious, and manipulative, the new Mrs. Harding had been giving her father no end of trouble her entire life. Now she gave it to her husband. Between the responsibilities of running the Star and the ceaseless nagging by his bride, Warren, never the steadiest of men, suffered a nervous breakdown. While he recuperated at the Kellogg Sanitarium. Is that the same sanitarium that created Frosted Flakes, basically? It wasn't Frosted Flakes before, it was something else flakes. I forgot what it was. I don't even remember. But it was so bland and bleh. But anyways, yeah, I wonder. In Battle Creek, Michigan, Florence did what came naturally to her. She meddled, specifically in her husband's newspaper business, and the results were positively astonishing. Few women of the age embraced the new feminism as sincerely as Florence did. She had always been independent, but now in her 30s, she drew on the tension that had shaped her youth to forge a personality based on a driving need to see things done her way. The Marion Star was soon done her way. Outdated equipment was installed, lapsed accounts were pushed into the black, coverage was dramatically expanded, circulation skyrocketed. Florence even hired a woman reporter, something that was virtually unheard of at the time. The newspaper became a raging success, thanks to the tireless Mrs. Harding, who now became known as the Duchess, to all, including Warren, who jumped when she said to. Now it's time to remake that husband of hers. Warren had developed a habit of escaping his domineering wife by traveling to Republican events, and he soon got a reputation as a better-than-average speaker and loyal party member. By 1899, he had made enough chums to win a seat in the Ohio Senate. 3 years later, he became lieutenant governor. The shiftless newspaper publisher was going places, thanks to his campaign manager. The Duchess organized everything from Warren's speech to his photo ops. Florence's experience at the Star had made a peerless businesswoman out of her, and it was all to her husband's benefit. He knew it, of course. Harding had a face and manner that put people at ease and drew them in, but he had no head whatsoever for the managerial side of things. That was the Duchess's province. But as Warren rose to the giddy heights of public affirmation, he responded to the influence accorded him by giving in to temptation. In 1905, Florence suffered the first in a series of kidney malfunctions that would dog her for the rest of her life. She spent months recovering from the surgery, during which time her husband expressed his sympathy by starting an affair with one of Florence's best friends, Carrie Phillips. The relationship would endure for years, which much to Florence's ignorance. But in 1911, perhaps as a result of intercepting a love letter, the Duchess found out about Warren's infidelity. The resulting malady affirmed the parameters of what had already been something of a business relationship. Florence, after threatening divorce, realized how much she had already invested in her boob of a husband. While Warren could imagine carry on in any political capacity without direction, they reached an understanding, though the Duchess, justifiably paying, forever remained on the lookout for Warren's playthings. Harding had lost a bid for Ohio governor in 1910, but had gone on to win a seat in the United States Senate in 1914. In Washington, while he maintained a sleazy affair with Carrie Phillips, you may say he began a sleazier one with a woman named Nan Burton. The Duchess continued to shape her husband's policies and career as she took a shine to life in the capital. As the senator's wife, her ambitions had been realized, a pleasure made possible by her continuing ignorance of Warren's philandering. Indeed, she looked with some trepidation at the Republican Party's hope of replacing Woodrow Wilson with her husband in 1920. Anyone could see by looking at the bedraggled Wilson that the presidency was a death sentence. Besides, Warren had a bad heart. The office would surely kill him. But Florence Hardy couldn't say no to the White House. Encouraged by so many Republican strategists, the Duchess accompanied her famous husband to the party convention in Chicago and truly showed no candidate's wife had ever played such a pivotal role in a campaign. Florence worked her cozy press connections to the hill, holding forth with unprecedented candor about everything, from her husband's views to her own suffrage beliefs. Gotch, dowdy, wearing a pince nez and giving to, I think that's how you say it, I don't know, and given to an excess of makeup that made her look rather absurd at times. Florence had being photographed. She posed for the cameras anyway and soon had the journalists eating out of her hand. She was earthy, folksy, a paragon of small-town America who shied from no question and offered herself as is. With a dash of optimism returning the country to normalcy, it was irresistible. The Hardings beat the pants off of Democratic opponent James Cox. With women being allowed to vote in 1920 for the first time, America was expecting a assertive first lady. They got her in space. The Duchess took on the cause of war veterans, who she nearly referred to as my boys. She visited them in hospitals, interviewed on behalf of their release of treatment, and began holding annual White House garden parties, at which they were the honored guests. And above all, she became the government's most visible champion of women's causes. Florence held press conferences specifically for women reporters, with whom she felt a close bond, worked to improve the lot of working women, and even lent her public support to the National Women's Party, a controversial organization that pushed for an equal rights amendment. She became the first lady to fly, which she insisted on doing with a female pilot, and she went so far as to organize a White House women's tennis championship. No doubt about it, this was one family to walk the walk. So even when it got deeper into it, she never probably said who the woman pilot was. I'm still thinking that it's Amelia Earhart. But who knows? We don't know for certain yet. And her husband, better ask the Duchess, became his mantra. And therein lies the problem. For all the chutzpah and shrewdness, Florence wasn't any better at choosing talent than her beleaguered husband. While Warren played poker, slept with his mistresses, and fretted over his profound lack of executive credentials, survived people the administration's unscrupulous cronies who used their appointments to fill their pockets. Popularly known as the Ohio Gang, they sang the Harding presidency in its loss of corruption. The crisis came to an end for the Hardings tragically and abruptly. In the midst of a cross-country tour in 1923, the president suffered heart trouble in California and died. No one can hurt you now, is what Florence was heard murmuring to his corpse as he lay in state at the White House. She was right. Harding died a popular man, untainted by the scandal and applying carelessness that would define his presidency. As for the Duchess, the woman mostly responsible for it, she would also escape public outrage. She died the following year. The final irony for Florence Harding is this: having come after a long and distinguished line of extraordinary first lady who loved to flirt with the emerging influence of women, she crossed the line to real equality, living and embodying what other women activists only dreamt of. She was difficult and abrasive, true, but a remarkable woman by any measure. Nevertheless, the principal object of her efforts, her hapless, unimaginable, fearful, and dishonest husband, must stand as an abject failure. Warren Harding was a disastrous president. At least in part, we have the Duchess to thank for that. Yeah, at least. Please comment, rate, and subscribe down below. And please comment down below how you think these series of videos are going. And please ring that bell notification so you can know when I upload. And if you're on TikTok, please like and follow my videos. And once I get to 100 on both TikTok and once I get to 100 subscribers on YouTube and 100 followers on TikTok, then I'm going to do something special for you guys, okay? Bye. Oh, and please pay for my eBay and or Mercari, okay? Bye.